my point is like, I'm just trying to connect with more people in this world. For me, I know that when I'm connected to people, myself and God, that's when I feel the most happy. That's when I feel like I'm thriving. That's when I feel successful. That it's not when I have all this money in the account. It's when I'm connecting with me, others, and God.
My guest on this episode is Rachel Kove, a certified recovery coach with over 17 years of personal recovery from alcohol, 15 years of experience in the mental health and addiction field, and she is dedicated to helping others find their path to healing. As the owner of The Love Mom, she fosters a supportive community of mothers navigating their own challenges. In addition to her coaching and writing, Rachel is a single mom, actress, podcast host, singer, and songwriter who's passionately sharing her journey through various creative outlets. And if you recognize the name Kove, well, she is the daughter of actor Martin Kove, known for Cobra Kai, Karate Kid, Rambo 2, and as well, she is the sister to actor Jesse Kove. If this is your first time checking out Knockin' Doorz Down, hit that subscribe button either on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you're checking it out. And if you are watching the video, please leave a comment in the section. Rachel, check it out. I'll see it. Leave a thumbs up. And if you got value out of this podcast, why not share it with somebody else? All right, here's Rachel Kove. Rachel Kove, thanks for joining me.
Thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.
I'm so excited. For those that haven't yet caught, I'll be a part of a panel at the Emergence Conference, the awesome TJ Woodward. You're going to be on it. And I started digging. I'm like, I want to meet you beforehand so we can get more out. So pump this up. But it's going to be a pretty cool event. I'm really looking forward to it.
Oh, I'm really excited. TJ is one of my very best friends. I believe in this conference with all of my heart. I went last year, actually sang at the conference, and then watched my really good friend Arthur Mogilevsky speak on one of the panels. And I believe in what TJ does and his message wholeheartedly. So I'm very excited for this conference.
Absolutely. And we'll talk more about that a little bit later on, but I don't know about you. I forget who it was, got me in the gratitude practice in the morning. So I start my conversations that way. 3 things you're grateful for today.
Well, I did my gratitude list this morning too. So I know exactly what I wrote this morning, but I try to stay in the moment because it shifted a little bit. I'm very grateful at how I am able to adapt to any situation. I'm very grateful for my mindset and that I focus on solution rather than the problem. And I'm very grateful for my son and his health and the support of his team at his school. And I feel like teachers don't get enough credit in this world. And my God, do principals and teachers, they are angels and gifts to this earth.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's ironic that the first 2 things you mentioned, we had technical issues before we hit record. So
Yeah.
I'm absolutely with you on having a solution-based mindset, which I'd like to get into. And then, as far as, my partner, she's a special ed teacher, little ones on the spectrum. My son, my oldest, on the spectrum, and that early intervention of those teachers was huge because he's a phenomenal, switched on young man. It's unreal. And I know that was a huge help for it.
Yeah, well, I think that we're supposed to be doing this whole parenting journey and human journey in a tribe. So I need a tribe to support me, to support my kid. So growing up when I was a kid, I couldn't appreciate the teachers the way I do now as a parent, realizing what they do and the patience that they have, but also like the good teachers that are just there to help your kid develop and succeed, that really treat your kid as an individual. Man, I just respect them so much. And I respect your partner and, you're a dad, so you understand this parenting journey. It's a ride.
Yes. And I'm so grateful to be sober now and for my kids to be switched on enough that if they have questions about the not sober dad, that we can talk about it too. That's been, huge. Because a lot of people get experience parenthood. I got sober and then I was a parent. I didn't get that.
Yeah. I think it's interesting how you said that, you want to be available for your kid to ask questions. I think that's really important. I think that it's really common, especially with the older generations, for the parents to not want to be honest about the struggles and the challenges or any addictions that they might have gone through because they're afraid their kids are going to do the same thing. I think that's really detrimental to a child. I think it's really helpful when an adult and a parent can normalize struggles and challenges and talk to the kid about the lessons they learned from those struggles and those challenges and anxiety. And I think that when parents can be more honest and vulnerable with their children, I think it sets the children up to feel comfortable with being vulnerable themselves as adults, as teenagers, with their friends, with as kids. I think it's honestly how we fix the world that we live in is by people being more vulnerable and being more honest about how they feel and caring about how we feel about caring about how others feel,
Yeah.
and being sensitive.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's valuable because it helps me not take things personally. And I don't know about you. It's funny you were talking. I was thinking of a particular teacher and not appreciating them until adulthood. I'm dyslexic, and people when I was a kid, that was like, oh, you go to that class, that you're one of the stupid kids or whatever it was. But it makes me be able to, as an adult, reflect back on those kind of things, or even with people now, and not take it personal because I don't know all their journey, their day, their moment. I mean, like I said, we had some technical issues getting this rolling. We could have a crap attitude. I'm just not going to do that because it's not how I roll. So I think it is so valuable to not only gain a greater consciousness, to coin a term there, little TJ Woodward thing, about our emotions and our emotional state, but know how to communicate them.
That's my passion. I mean, if you know me, which you're starting to, you'll find out that I'm passionate about 1,000 different things. One of them is teaching people how to communicate consciously, teaching people how to communicate vulnerably, really helping people see other individuals, really helping people listen actively to other individuals, and really learning how to listen empathetically and to empower people to try to understand the other person rather than control them, judge them, invalidate them, minimize them. Uh, I really want people to learn how to be a safe space for other people to be vulnerable. I often kind of use this analogy when I'm running groups because one of the things that I do is I am a certified recovery coach. And so I run and facilitate groups at outpatient facilities and residential facilities. And a lot of the groups I teach, I'm focusing on teaching people how to communicate very consciously. And I use this analogy a lot in my groups where I tell people, I want you to imagine that you're a baseball player and you're a professional baseball player. And when you're a professional baseball player, you have to learn how to hit the ball, you have to learn how to throw the ball, and you have to learn how to catch the ball. And I think that a lot of people focus on how to deliver a message, how to deliver vulnerability, how to deliver something assertively. And I don't think there's enough attention on how to catch it and then how to receive it. And then what do I do with that now that I have this information? Now that I'm in this place of understanding someone, now how do I communicate back to someone what they said? How do I reflect back what they said? How do I help someone feel non-judged? How do I help someone feel loved? And how do I help someone feel connected with what they just shared with me? And I think teaching someone to communicate assertively how they feel vulnerably, and then how do I also create safety in listening to them.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. It very much reminds me of senders and receivers. I taught for a few years, and there was always the callback, so to speak. I would deliver the brief lecture and the instructions, and then I would ask, please reciprocate back to me what you got out of it to make sure that we're on the same page. In an impatient world, we jump right to, oh, I saw what you're putting down. This is my opinion, forgetting that we have that option too of, hey, I heard what you said. Let me make sure what I'm hearing is correct. In addition to, we have our emotional states, and there's so much subconscious ways we deliver language, right? If it's with a smile, if it's with the frown, if it's with anger, if it's with this, there's so much to it that it can convolute a situation really quick, I think, if you don't have some of those wonderful skill sets, be it a way to self-regulate or, what have it. I just know they become very valuable for me. Sometimes I just like, give me 5 minutes, let me connect with my breath so that I make sure that I'm here, I'm present, and I'm hearing what you're saying, and I'm able to reciprocate back what I got out of the message to confirm that's what you were conveying.
Yeah. And what you said that's half the battle, right? Like, let me reflect back what you said. And I think the other tools to use, right, is how do I take responsibility for when I've harmed somebody, right? How do I set a boundary? How do I communicate when I'm scared? How do I communicate when I'm really angry? How do I tolerate someone else's anger? How do I express when I'm feeling shamed or invalidated? I think that one of the key components to communication is being really mindful and having a desire to be considerate of someone else's past, having a desire to be considerate of someone else's trauma. I think like half the battle is like, do you have a desire to be sensitive? Do you have a desire to really listen to what someone is saying and to validate their emotions?
Knockin' Doors Down by Carlos Vieira, now available wherever you get audiobooks.
I wasn't done partying, and I didn't want the binge to end. I think I knew that when I finally got home, I'd have to face what I had done, and I wasn't ready to do that. Being responsible for my actions wasn't something I was looking forward to. I had abandoned my wife and baby, my family, and my business. I wanted to avoid the shame of returning to what I had left behind. Even though I was not yet going home, I wasn't sure I had enough resources to continue the binge.
Click the link in the podcast description to find out more.
I always tell people, like, every individual you are coming into contact with, you are coming into contact with their past. You are coming into contact with their traumas. You are coming into contact with their hurt. You are coming into contact with their passions. And this is just a moment in time of a whole history of someone's life. You know what I mean? Attached to them. So I think that, like, we have to learn how to consider each other. I think now, especially, it's like we've become so like individualized and separated and polarized. It's like, how do we learn how to listen to each other, respect each other's God-given right to have your own opinion, to have your own experience, right? While also still showing love, while also still maintaining your own sense of self and your own boundaries. I think that's the dance. That's the dance of this human experience with oneself as well as with relationship, in my opinion.
Yeah. It's well, I don't want to say that. It's simple, but not easy.
Yeah, it's so true. I always say it's like this human experience is so dumb because it's so complex and so complicated, and yet it's so simple at the same time.
Yeah. And I don't know. I mean, this is something I was having a discussion with guys after a group meeting. And I was just talking about, like, we just have it so easy. Like, what are you talking about, man? We're like faced with this, and the economy's bad, and we're in a divided country and world, and there's war. And I go, yeah, but if you think back, like every day was survival. I mean, I know some of you guys have said, "Oh, I'm poor." Like, you poor is not what childhood that I remember of friends of mine that were poor. Like, that was, oh, we all we have is peanut butter and jelly and bread in the house.
And we certainly don't have a TV. And here you are on the newest iPhone, and you got every streaming service. Like, horror's become a different thing. Survival's become a different thing. And so sometimes I think we can overcomplicate um, aspects of life that are really quite simple. And I say that because I just see when I do that, it pulls me away from that gratitude of the basic things. I live in a nice neighborhood. I am so gifted. I make a better income than 90% of the world. Granted, I say that and people are, whoa, it's not that much money. Like, do look it up. It's pretty scary. And we're so fortunate. So it's all those kind of things that I try to keep in mind too, when, I'm conversing with someone too, that those kind of perspectives upon life that differ from mine.
Yeah, but I think that's beautiful. And I think that's what communicating consciously is. I think I read this from somewhere that communicating consciously is communicating with consideration, considering and being aware of all aspects of what's contributing to this moment, considering where do I want this conversation to go? How do I want this conversation to move? What's the goal that I'm trying to achieve with this conversation? What am I trying to help this person feel in this conversation? What's the impact I want this person to have from this conversation? And it's a lot. That's a lot of stuff to consider in one moment. That's a lot of brain activity. However, I think that if we learn to consider each other and we learn to communicate mindfully and conscious like that, I do think that we will have better relationships in our lives. And I was listening to a podcast recently, and it was so validating because there was this FBI agent, he was being interviewed on communication. And he said that when people feel seen and heard, like truly seen and heard in the present moment, we release oxytocin and we release serotonin. Right. So when we release the oxytocin and the serotonin, we naturally and physiologically feel more relaxed, and we feel more happy when we're relaxed. And when we're not in survival mode, we're relaxed, and we make better choices when we're relaxed. We're more open to relationships and challenges when we're relaxed. We're more open to obstacles. We're not as fear-based when we're relaxed. Where I think when I'm more relaxed, I'm more available to the simple things that matter. I'm more available to help my kid in his anger and his temper tantrums. I'm more available to really pay attention to the little things during my day that I might be ignoring, if I'm super stressed.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So I don't know. I really believe that living consciously, communicating with whoever we're around, like learning how to really communicate, I really believe is a huge solution to this human experience of mental health crisis and addiction that's happening in the world right now.
Yeah. Well, and simplest way I can put it is if we don't communicate our needs, wants, intentions, nobody else is going to do it for us.
Yeah.
Like when I started dating my partner, I was very open and honest about certain things. Like, I'm not solution to your problems. I'm here to be in your life and enhance it and definitely make it prosper in certain ways. But I want you to understand, like, I don't look at you to fill my voids or any of these things. Like I'm here to be in a partnership and companionship. And I believe I use the words like, I don't believe in soulmates other than the one in the mirror, because I've got to meet my needs. Now, that doesn't mean I don't have relationship, needs, wants, desires, or goals that I'd like to see come to fruition. But I really got on a journey of eliminating that external locus of fulfillment and satisfaction. And that doesn't mean that my works in the world are unfulfilling and unimportant. I get up for them. I mean, I got up to worked at another podcast I do, I think at like 6 o'clock this morning or something, so I just think that's an important part of the process too, in a world that we're sold all of this, seek the external validation. It's important to pull back as a part of that communication process and the talk with self in these things. Because I mean, like I know to us that we're addicts, I mean, nobody beat us up like we beat ourselves up.
Yeah, I just ran a group. It's funny you were talking about emotional needs. I was just running a group earlier at a residential facility called Ohana Recovery and in Malibu, and it's an incredible facility. And we were talking about emotional needs, but we were talking about how to have a positive relationship with self, with other people, and then with our higher power. And communication is how we do that. Yes. I have to know what my emotional needs are in order to be able to communicate that to another individual. And I think that we've been raised in this culture that has really pressured us to believe that our answers and our solutions come from, getting married, having the perfect family, having the job, and that our problems are going to be fixed if we find the love of our lives and we ride off into the sunset. And it's just not the case. We get into relationship and it's a honeymoon phase for a while. And then once that honeymoon phase ends, you really actually meet the other person and you meet their traumas and you meet their childhood. And when you get in a relationship with someone, you're getting into a relationship with their attachment style. You're getting into a relationship with their hurt, with their wounds. You're getting into a relationship with their self-defense mechanisms and their deflections. Right. And so we have to really, I think when we get into relationship with people, know what we're actually signing up for and that it really truly is something to be decided. It should be a choice because now you're putting yourself in this relationship with this person. And so I talked about the other person for a second, right? But now I, as the individual, come with my history of trauma, my history of triggers, my childhood, my attachment styles, my relationship with God, my body, my soul, my sexuality, all of that. Now we're going to partner up together. Two different people, right? And the fuck do we do that, right? Well, for me, it's communication, because if I know how to ask questions, if I can make agreements, if I can really listen, if I can lay my ego aside, if I can really take responsibility, like radically take responsibility for my behaviors and how my behaviors affected you and impacted you and landed on you, that can create so much harmony and peace. I think that communication creates safety. Communication creates understanding. Communication creates harmony. It creates intimacy. Mm-hmm. I'm sure you've heard this, like intimacy, into me, I see, into me, you see, yeah. And I think that intimacy is what we're all after. And yet we're all so terrified of it. And we all some of us don't know what to do when we have it, or some people sabotage it. And I think that's the goal, is connection and intimacy. Now that's the goal. How do we get there? How do we get there? And communication, I believe, is one of the biggest ways and one of the most effective strategies to get to that goal. And then from there, right, it's like, okay, do I have a desire to communicate? Great. I need to improve my communication. Perfect. Okay. So we've established that. I need to know what my emotional needs are, right? For me, I teach this in my groups. We all have a bunch of emotional needs to be validated. We need to be comforted, right? We need to feel safe. We need to feel seen. We need to feel understood. We need to feel heard. We need security. We need safety. We need belonging and community and connection, right? Okay, well, what people tend to do in relationships is they go, you need to meet all those needs for me. Kind of like what you were just talking about, right? Now you're responsible because we're married and we're having sex and we had a child and, we've decided to be together. Now you need to fix all my problems and you need to meet those needs. And that's wrong. The first person to meet those needs is you. It's like, oh, I just really want someone to see me. I made a joke of I'll get to that in a minute because I wrote a short film with my writing partner about that. Oh, I just want you to see me. What does that mean?
Yeah.
I'm looking at you. What does that mean? Right? well, I really want you to comfort me. Do you know how to comfort yourself? Have you ever hugged yourself?
Yeah. And what about the actions that we might take to be seen? It's like, well, I'm sorry, but you're acting like an irrational child, and that doesn't get my attention, you know?
Right. Right. And also, like, if you're acting like an irrational child, are you able, as the irrational child, right? And the irrational child is in the adult body. That's that inner child, right? So when that irrational child is being irrational, right? Can the adult step back and go, oh my God, my body and my inner child are having complete irrational responses. That's my inner child. Can I now look at my partner and say, wow, my inner child's super scared right now. I must be feeling really overwhelmed and stressed right now. Let me take a step back. Let me go on a walk. I'm really sorry I yelled at you. How did that make you feel when I yelled at you? Well, and then the other person has to go, well, I felt really hurt when you had that sharp tone. I just felt like you were talking down to me. And then the other person has to go, yeah, I really hear that you felt like I was talking down to you and that you felt hurt by that. That makes a lot of sense. Right? Thank you for sharing that with me. Acknowledge it, validate it. Instead, this is what people do. Well, yeah, I just feel like you really hurt me when you talk to me like that. Oh, well, you feel hurt. What about everything I do for you? Are you ever going to acknowledge that? I feel hurt by you all the time. It's that defensiveness, right? And that defensiveness is protecting that vulnerable child, that vulnerable inner child that was wounded as a kid. And so, I think that when we get into relationship, whether it's friendship, whether it's relationship with someone at work, whether it's a romantic partnership, whether it's someone in our family, we have to learn how to deliver a message and receive a message and create safety in this dynamic.
Yeah. And it's a challenge. And I think the thing too, I don't want people to be like, wow, that sounds so incredibly daunting. And that's very familiar. I operate that way, is like, it's like anything else, a work in progress. You're developing new skill sets. Like I'm sure, even though you teach it, you're not always perfect at it. I'm not. I know I am.
No,
not
I am. No, I'm kidding.
Of course. Who the hell you think you're talking to, Jay? Of course I am.
Oh my God. I mean, last week I got into a huge argument with one of my best friends, and I was talking to this person so I was reacting from such a wounded place.
Have you dug into the archives of past Knockin' Doorz Down podcast episodes? The Knockin' Doorz Down podcast archive is available to you for free. Check it out. Here's a snippet from when Charlie Sheen was on the podcast.
There's another thing to consider that's just practical and real and true and rampant. Fentanyl.
Yeah.
Fentanyl. You keep around with street drugs these days. I mean, there's a 90% chance that it's gonna have fentanyl. And there's a 90% chance you're not gonna survive it.
This episode and so many more in the Knockin' Doorz Down archive. And while you're at it, hit that subscribe button, give this video a thumb up, leave a comment, and share with somebody else that you know will get value out of the Knockin' Doorz Down podcast.
And then 5 days later, when I saw them at coffee, I held their hand and I said, I want to take responsibility. What I said was so hurtful. I'm so sorry. And I'm so committed to doing better with this. I was so angry and I was such in a fight or flight mode. I really apologize. And I want to hear how that affected you.
Yeah.
Right. So like, it's not about being perfect. It's about going back and repair. The repair, that's the most important part, because we do fuck up. And I know that people can say like, this is daunting. And when you say that, I'm like, well, maybe if people really hear what relationship is, right? It could be more of something, if that's something that you really want, know what you're signing up for, because that's what relationship really is. Relationship is the repair work. It's the conflict. It's the hearing someone, listening to someone. It's the vulnerability. It's a lot of it is how the fuck do you get through conflict?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, it's the hugest part of it. I could think of the example of that I'll get it's time for our budget meeting. And of course, that shifts my energy in a way. And then I'm like, okay, give me a minute. Let's get talk through it. And it's the irony of it is that's my response for whatever reasons that I still work to uncover. But my partner is easygoing. Like, a lot of this stuff is, at least in my perspective and the choices that I've changed in how I operate, a lot of it's easygoing. Like, it's an easygoing thing. Like, it takes a lot of energy, like the situation you had with your friend, to continue to be pissed off and then not own it. Like, I don't know about you. Like, my body keeps a score. Ironically, a book that I've been reading, same title. Like, I know.
Such a good book.
Yeah, I know when I need to apologize. I don't dick around and waste time with that anymore. Like I know, and I've had, and I'm sure you have too. Like, what are you talking about? Like, you don't owe an apology for anything. I'm like, no, because of the way I felt in this scenario, I felt I needed to. Even when it's people like, yeah, man, that's not really how it went down. It's all good, but it's like, I still know the responsibility I hold within the relationship, and I can't expect the other individual to operate in a similar manner unless I actually do so.
Yeah, well, I think that is very, very well said. I think that it always is about how do you feel about it, right? How do you? Sorry, I got a little distracted because as you were saying that, I was thinking about this story of, like, I was working with this coach a long time ago, and I was like, oh, I just really want a partner, and she's like, okay, great, like, let's find you a partner, and she was like, okay, what do you want in this partner? And I listed everything, and she was like, okay, now that you've listed all of this, now I want you to become that, right? So it's like, when you were talking about that story, I was thinking to myself, like, oh, yeah, we want other people to apologize, but do you apologize? Right? We want other people to take responsibility, but, like, do you take responsibility? Right? Do you own when you're wrong? Are you willing to lay that ego aside? Right? Even if you don't agree with how you affected the other person, can you lay aside your ego and really look and hear and see someone else's experience, even if you completely disagree?
Yeah.
Even if that's not how you experienced it, can you lay aside your ego and really listen to how someone else experienced something? That's the work right there. People are constantly invalidating other people's emotions and thoughts and experiences because they're totally different from theirs. And that's what's wrong. That's wrong. If you do that in a relationship, in a conversation, you are going to create more chaos than peace and understanding. Yeah. You need to go into conversations trying to understand the other person rather than trying to be right.
Yeah. When you talk about that, made me think of a conversation, I don't know, sometime in the last year I had with my brother, my older brother. And it was about something in our childhood. And he's like, yeah, that's not what I remember happening. He goes, that may be how you remember it, and he's got a much better memory than me, and also being older. And, I'm an individual still with a very vivid imagination, and I'm sure I amalgamized some things. And then he was like, no, it was this. And then we kind of pieced together what probably happened was somewhere in the middle. And it wasn't a situation that triggered any sort of a trauma response or whatever. He's like, yeah, it just was another day to him. Whereas to me, it wasn't. It was a pinpoint memory, and it's one of those data points in the history of my life that if I look back, I'm like, oh, that was a shitty occurrence. And it's so interesting how it is. But at no point was he like, no, you're wrong. No, he understood that it came from that certain place where for me, that was my recollection of that experience. Although he did help me see some fallacies in my memory of it. And I was like, oh, damn, you're right. I forgot about that part of it. But also.
Yeah. Sorry.
I was going to say, yeah, also that recognition that occurrence put me in a fight or flight mode. Well, how well is my brain responding and wanting to store the information? My body will. My body remembers how I felt, my brain probably went into total shutdown.
Yeah, and the fact that he validated the experience probably made you feel heard and understood and accepted.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
And if someone makes you feel heard, accepted, and understood, do you feel closer to them?
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's the point. Like that's my point is like I'm just trying to connect with more people in this world. For me, I know that when I'm connected to people, myself and God, that's when I feel the most happy. That's when I feel like I'm thriving. That's when I feel successful. That it's not when I have all this money in the account. It's when I'm connecting with me, others, and God. That is for me when I am the happiest in my life. And I think that in order to do that, right, it's like we need skills to do it. And they don't teach it a lot in schools yet.
Yeah.
So it's like people have to get motivated and figure it out themselves. And, you know, like you have this podcast, right? This is your way of communicating to the world, you know, specific messages. And hopefully people listen and they do because you've got a good following and they can take this information and then go apply it and integrate it into their lives.
Absolutely.
You know?
Absolutely. And that, you know, that's the huge part of, you know, that common saying, a man who seeks pleasure or lives for pleasure has no purpose. And it's like, yeah, in purpose. And I also get joy. Like, I didn't know, I don't know about you and your active addiction. Joy was not a thing that occurred. A lot of pleasure seeking and a lot of hurt, but actual genuine joyful moments, no, I don't recollect any.
Yeah, that's actually a really great thing to consider. Did I have any joy? The only time I think when because I was a very, very severe alcoholic. The only times I really experienced joy was when I was playing soccer. I was a very competitive soccer player till I was about 20 years old. And I think that was the only soccer was kind of saving my life at that point in my life when I was drinking. But looking back, I wasn't even present. I wasn't even there. I was totally dissociated. The only thing I could ever focus on was how do I get rid of my pain? What do I have to do today to get rid of my pain? What do I have to do today to not feel? What do I have to do today to just be gone? That was my intention every day I woke up, was so self-absorbed in how do I get rid of my pain? And, you know, I really like, I remember like it was 17 years ago. So 17 years ago is when I got into recovery. And so it's just so interesting to think about that time because it was a very long time ago, but I'm only like 1 second away from going back there if I don't take care of myself. Isn't that interesting? Mm-hmm. Isn't that interesting? No matter how much time you get away from it, it's 1 second can take everything away that you've built, you know? So people are like, God, Rachel, you do so much work on yourself. It's like, yeah, because I have the best life. And if I don't do this work on myself, I will kill myself or I'll drink myself into a grave. And I have too much going on for me to ever consider that again.
Yep.
You know? So it's like that joy that you were talking about. It's like, I have so much joy in my life now. So much joy. And there was one thing of joy when I was in my active alcoholism. One, now I have like a million things. I don't want to lose that.
Oh yeah. And that's so important to share with people too. And, you know, it's that, you know, sick man has one problem, a healthy man has 1,000. And it's like, yeah, I'll take I like my problems now because I don't want that problem back. Like I hold those memories close. Like I'll get nauseous. I forget what we were watching, but we were watching something and someone's excessively drinking. And I had a physical response like, oh my God, I remember that horrible feeling, you know? And it's a blessing because my mind no longer connects that to any sort of pleasurable experience whatsoever, you know, because it's like, yeah, people may not understand it and believe. I'm like, I would do a 30 pack a day of beer, no problem. And, you know, people go, oh, I know people that done that. No, I'm not talking about the guy that was at the lake. I'm talking about the guy that once his kids are asleep around 8:00 does this by 1 a.m. in a matter of 5 hours. You know, you do the math. That's 6 of them. That's one, just, you know, and it's that I keep that misery that I lived very close in my head to keep me from ever losing my balance on the tightrope walk.
Yeah, I think that's really beautiful. I think it's important to do because I think that you'll always have motivation to do the work if you keep it that close to you.
Mm-hmm.
I think that if you are aware of the pain and the depths of the pain and despair that you went into, you'll always know what you are capable of going back to and recreating in your life if you're aware of it, if you never forget it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think that, gosh, that's why, people will say to me, oh, well, you only drank for like 2.5 years of your life. I'm like, yeah, but do you know what I did in those 2.5 years? Like, I ruined my soccer career. I like honesty is one of my biggest values. I was so dishonest with my parents. I was so dishonest with myself. I sabotaged my dreams. I couldn't go play a soccer tournament in Spain. I showed up to my soccer games hungover. I showed up to my games under the influence. I showed up to practice high. I would make friends with people just so that I could raid their liquor cabinets because at that time, like I'm underage. So I have to like go to people's houses and make sure that they have alcohol in their parents' cabinets and then take it from them. And I would lose friendships because of that. Right. But the thing is they didn't understand that I had to drink. Like I had to. For them, it's like they have alcohol in their liquor cabinet. It's not a big deal. I'm like, no, but I need it to survive. I don't know how to be in this world without it. I don't know how to look people in the eye. I don't know how to feel like I'm in my skin. I don't know how to feel good. I don't know how to like actually be alive without it.
Yeah.
And so I really sabotaged a lot of my success back then. And then I think the interesting thing, I have so much cat hair on me right now. My cat is just like all over me. I'm sorry. I don't mean to be looking like I'm picking my nose, but I'm just trying to take this cat hair off, I think that what's really important for a lot of, people to understand that it's like, if you remove the alcohol or the substance or whatever the compulsive behavior is, you're left with this underlying stuff. And that's what needs to be addressed because once I removed the alcohol, I was left with my trauma. I was left with my depression. I was left with my anxieties, my fears, my low self-esteem, these negative belief systems. I was left with my inability to really connect with people. Mm-hmm. I was left with just overwhelming pain that I used alcohol to run away from. So I believe that addiction is a fight or flight response. I really, really, really do. And for me, it's my flight response. So I'm out, I'm checking out, I'm escaping. Now you remove that. Now I have to confront all of this stuff that I've been running from for so long. Yeah. Right. And so when we're confronting that, we need people, we need a tribe of people, we need support, we need a higher power because I don't know how to ever do this alone, ever. We need purpose. We need to educate ourselves. We need to develop some skills. We need to understand how to set boundaries. We need to understand how to actually be honest. I think that's a really important thing too, to actually teach ourselves how to be honest with ourselves. I didn't know what that looked like because I lied to myself for so long. I didn't know how to be honest with myself because I was so good at lying to everyone else around me. Everyone thought I was like happy all the time because I showed up and I was really good with this extroverted, outgoing personality and making people laugh. And then I would be going home and cutting or going home and drinking myself or trying to figure out how to kill myself. That was me.
Yeah. Yeah.
In and out of alcoholism addiction. So it's like,
yeah, that resonates with me a lot, because I grew up in a home of addiction and underwent some sexual abuse between 5 and 6. And, I was always looking for something to run away from the grief instead of do the dance with it, process it, understand it, also understand, okay, I wasn't protected. Me now protects that child. Like when I go talk usually to high schools, I prefer, classrooms. And I remember the last time I did this, young lady goes, wow, when you talked about your sexual trauma, you seemed very calm about it. I'm like, because now I am. Like, I'm not ashamed. I'm not ashamed. I hope that the individual that did it didn't do it to anybody else. I'm willing to bet, and I'm willing to bet that he went through it too. But no, it just doesn't sit in my body. Like, I'm not ashamed to do it. I'll get up in front of Celebrate Recovery, to, AA, Smart Recovery, and whatever. If it's going to help people now, yeah, absolutely. Because so many people never come forward with that, especially men, and carry shame and guilt. And I'm like, yeah, I tried to run through it, and I went from the next pretty woman to the next pretty woman before I discovered alcohol. Then oddly, they really came hand in hand then, and talk about really screwing up my world, my radio career, bad relationships, parenthood when my children were early. Hey, I was a master of it all.
I mean, me too. I'm right there with you. I I'm a master at all. That makes me laugh. Right? It's just like I laugh out of relatability. I understand so much. And I just want to say, like, you are so admirable for openly talking about your sexual abuse, because it is so common in our culture. I've worked with thousands of individuals, and it is something that comes up almost every group I run. And I will say that I do believe it happens a lot more with men than men are willing to talk about. And so I just want to say the fact that you can be a man and talk about it, I think is so inspiring, and it's so needed, because when you are vulnerable, it gives someone else permission to be vulnerable, and it gives someone else permission to have the courage to speak up and to be honest and to talk about it. I mean, the power of vulnerability is just, it's godly, it's magical. Yeah. The power of story is so magical. And, I like that yeah, you're welcome. And I like that you said, like, I can talk about it now because I'm calm about it now. It's like, clearly you've done the work. I think, like, that's the beauty of working through our pain and our trauma, is like the wound then becomes our gift. The wound then becomes the thing that moved us into our healed self. Mm-hmm. I heard this thing one time where it said, like, your greatest childhood wound becomes the gift to the world. And then someone else, because I don't like to claim things that like I didn't say, and someone else I know talked about how, like, your wounds are your gifts, right? And I really believe that. Like, I really believe that my pain that I've gone through in my life, that pain now gives me purpose. I turn my pain into purpose. I turn my pain into power. Everything that has happened to me in my life that has caused me hurt and trauma and pain and sadness and grief, I don't stay a victim to that. I let that transform me. I let that help me transcend into joy. I let that help me move closer to love. Every time there's been pain, I go, okay, because, like, in my past, I run from it. I don't run from shit anymore. Now it's about, how do I love myself through this, right? What do I have to grieve? What do I have to feel? And I think that's part of it's like the biggest part, really. It's like, basically, I just have to learn how to feel things. Right?
Yeah.
Like, basically, like, that's the problem. We don't want to feel things that are uncomfortable. So the solution is learn how to feel things. Learn how to feel things that make you uncomfortable. Learn how to face things in yourself that make you uncomfortable. And then on the other side of that, you're comfortable.
Yeah.
You're more at ease. You're more at peace. You're more in your body, because you're not running away from your body. I love how you constantly refer to, like, oh, it doesn't sit well in my body. Yeah, we live in our body. So if I am running away from my body all day with, like, people, places, and things and substances, and I'm basically telling myself I'm not good enough. I'm not important. I'm not lovable, because you constantly want to run away from me. So why? I don't understand. I must not be worthy, right? But if I, like, learn how to feel my feelings, learn how to sit in my body, learn how to get still, learn how to express my anger, my sadness, my grief, my joy, my love, learn how to, tell people when I'm feeling afraid, right? I don't have anything to run from. And then I can be present, because the present moment has so much to offer. I'm connected to everything in the present moment. It's not something I have to run from anymore. Gets to be something that I get to participate in and create from.
Yes, it's really all we got.
That's it.
Yeah. I mean, I know some people don't, they're like, what? It's like, well, your past is done. You're not going to go back and change that. You can sit and try to dictate and control the future. It's like, Look, when I started my recovery journey and then got asked to do this podcast by my friend Carlos Vieira, that's where the title comes from, his book. He's like, look, I know you're talking so much about it, I'm not going to be able to do a podcast, but if you go out and I'll sponsor it and, help with my book. He had a very gnarly cocaine addiction, and got sober and did a lot of good stuff. I didn't expect all these gifts that have come my way and continue to come my way. I couldn't have scripted them, and I've talked about it on here before that my mom reminded me of this. I was a baseball player when I was a kid. I loved the movie Major League. I was a Charlie Sheen fan. And I did acting as well. And I remember saying something to my mom to the effect, oh, I want to be in a movie with him or something like that. Well, I wasn't in a movie with him, but he's been on this here podcast twice. So I've shared screen time. So it's weird how these things, odd things come to fruition. I had written down, I have a little card in my wallet, like, I'd like to speak at a conference. I didn't know TJ. He reached out to me like, hey, I've heard good things from people about your podcast. But if you're looking for I'm like, yeah, I know you. Please come on. I'm familiar with your work. And he's like, hey, would you be interested in doing a podcast with some other people doing media and recovery and mental health? I'm like, yes, I would. Let's make this happen. It's, it's the weird things that happen. So I can't predict the future, but I got this conversation with you.
Yeah, well, I believe that God exists in us. And I believe that when we're present, we have the opportunity to connect to God, to this presence, to the beauty of everything that this universe has to offer. And if I'm one with that presence, right, then I am one with creation. I am one with everything that's available to be unfolded and everything that's available to manifest from this present moment. And so when you remove the substances, you're giving yourself the opportunity to be present, to connect to God, to connect to the unfolding of who you are, and you are so much more than you think you are. And really, trauma and addiction has the ability to steal people from what they're capable of. Yeah. And when you access this power, you're unlimited. You are unlimited. And Marianne Williamson says that, we're more afraid of our light than we are of our dark. I 100% believe that. The dark is easy. Like, it sucks and it's annoying, but it's much more controllable.
Oh yeah.
I think it's much more controllable. I know what to expect. I know where I can live. I can live hidden, but the light, that's possibility. That's nonstop creation. That's personal accountability. That's personal responsibility. That's being loyal to your principles. That's following up your word with action. That's taking risks, facing rejection, and facing people not liking you. That's hard.
Yeah.
That's hard. You know what I mean? So if one has the courage to face their dark, turn their wounds into gifts, really learn how to love the shit out of yourself, then you there is no other where to go. There's no other place to go than closer to God. That's it. And the more you're closer to you, others, and your higher power, the more your life expands to just gifts of abundance and abundance and abundance. And you're awake to it, not sleepwalking through life. You're an active participant. And for me, what happened is, like, every day I was like, oh my God, like, I just want to, like, go be proactive. Like, I have a lot of energy because I'm awake and present and here. And I want to, like, go use this energy to go create and be of service and be good. I really was that person when I was younger. I would wake up crying because I was awake. I was so scared to face reality. I wanted to die so badly. I tried 3 times. I tried to commit suicide 3 times, but then I got too scared each time, and it was too scary. So when I say I understand what it's like to be in the depths of pain, that I don't want to be here anymore, I get it. But now I'm like, I don't want to go to sleep. I don't want to be tired because I want to be awake, and I want to go do things with my kid and with my business and with my acting career and all my passions. And I want to go be around people, and I want to figure out how I can help people, and I want to be helped in return in other areas. And life is so good now, and it's so rich and full, so
yeah.
I don't know how to end that, but
Well, I'd say if you had a microphone, you could drop it and be like, fuck it, we're
grab
out.
it. I have a microphone in the other room. I could grab it.
Well, and I think, and I may have heard this, I'm not taking credit for it, but we were talking about this at a meeting a while back, and somebody says God helps those who help themselves. I said, no, that's not how it works. I said, God helps those who help themselves, then help others with it. That's when the magic happens. It doesn't happen when you help yourself. That's the beginning of the process, just to see what your gifts are to the world. But if you get to a point where you've helped yourself, these are my gifts, and you still sit there in the same dark room, which I can relate to, just wanting to sleep and not be here and trying to kill yourself, no magic's going to happen. You better get out there and start helping the world with it.
Well, I believe we're born to do that. I believe that our gifts are what we're supposed to use to help people in the world. And I think that when we're in active addiction, or when we're in our constant trauma reactions and responses, I think we're reacting from a wounded place rather than a place from love. And when love exists, it's just constant creation. So I really believe that when we do this work, we get in contact with our talents, with our skills, with these gifts, and you will always find that your gift is in some way going to contribute to life, to people. You will always see that your gift that you have, whatever it is, that purpose is to add something to another individual's life. You'll always see it. It will never not be that. Yep. Like even if it's like knitting a blanket, right? Well, because I've had people in group be like, well, I asked this question in group, like, what are you talented at? Well, I'm not talented at anything. I'm like, yes, you are. Well, I like to knit. I'm like, okay, great. So like, what do you like to knit? I like to make blankets. I'm like, well, you don't think that making blankets helps people? Mm-hmm. Oh, well, I guess if someone's cold, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. What if you like
anything that you're good at can help someone?
Yeah. I mean, for me, I'd be like, you like doing blanket? Well, let's get a hold of the NICU unit at the local hospital. They might need more blankets. There you go. Whatever it is, it's like,
yep.
Understand. And I don't care, and I'm not diminishing this, but if you work at the local convenience store or whatever it is, you get that opportunity to be of service to people, like embrace it. Like, yep. I get that it may not be where your goals are in life, but if you start operating in a certain way of understanding it, you're going to find you'll get there quicker.
Yep. And also, like Gary Vee talks about this all the time, it's whatever you're doing, make sure you're adding value to something or someone. I think that when we are adding value, we feel more purposeful, and trust me, I've sold toner at telemarketing agencies, right? When I was pregnant, I was driving Uber. I've done a lot of jobs that I didn't necessarily want to do, so that I could make money to support myself, my family, on the pursuit of my other goals and dreams. But there's so much to learn in that time, right? There's so much to learn. And if you can go into every moment, whether you don't want to show up to that job really or not, and if you can go into every space going, how can I add value to someone's life in this moment? What can I give to someone's life in this moment? How can I make my life so valuable that because I'm here, I get to add meaning to someone else's experience? You're going to have more usefulness in that monotonous job, right? You're going to feel more useful. You're going to feel like, okay, how can I tie this job to my long-term job? What skill do I need to sharpen here while I'm in this space to prepare me for that space? One of these church podcasts that I listen to talks about like, okay, you'll ask something from God, but God's like, are you prepared for that? No, then go get some experience and get prepared.
Uh-huh. Spot on. I have often thought about how unprepared, why I didn't receive maybe things in the past that I prayed for. Is like, I would have fucked that up then so big. Like, God would have been like
hard, like bad.
Yeah, like, are you sure about that? I don't think so. And doing me a favor. And I think people forget that. We ask for I don't know about you. I'm a Christian, and we would pray for abundance or these things and stuff like that. Like, I just stopped praying for myself. I just that if I do mention it's just, hey, it's God's will. I pray for the abundance of others and everything else, because it just seems to continue to unfold for me. And it's like, hey, it's a good thing, like I'm just grateful. I'm grateful now that I'm in a place that I recognize that there is a higher power that not only loves me, but has purpose for me. When I always believed in God and a higher power, I just didn't think there was one that loved me or had purpose for me. How egotistical is that, right? Like, out of all the people in existence, I'm the one he has that he to just God has no purpose for whatsoever. Okay.
Yeah, and yet you come from God.
But
there's no purpose from you, even though you come from God. So it's fascinating to me.
Yeah, if we didn't, I mean, hey, the science is there. All of our fingerprints are different. These are the only ones that will ever exist. Our eyes, these are the only ones. They've even proved it up to a 99.9%. They can identify someone forensically by their ear and all the bones in there. Think about your voice. If there wasn't voice recognition technology, obviously there's something unique about everything you see, hear, touch, and say in this world. So yeah, obviously we're all coming from God. Like jump into that fact, like how awesome you are that you are even here.
Yeah, it's pretty unbelievable. Like it's yes, this experience is a wild ride, and there's a lot of pain and suffering, and also there's a lot of joy. There's a lot of pleasure. There's a lot of excitement and passion, but we can't know one without the other. I cannot know my light without my dark. I have to understand it. I have to learn how to get close to it. I have to understand, that parts of me that I don't think are acceptable by others. And I have to learn to love those parts. And from that experience of partnering up with the light and the dark is creation. Is the natural unfolding of that is creation. You will create something. You know what I mean? You will have no choice but to create something from that place, because love is now born. It's like more love will always create more love. That's just what happens. And so I think we're amazing. I think you're amazing. I think I'm amazing. I think that anyone who's willing to face their shit is unbelievable, because I think people taking personal responsibility for their traumas, for their pain, and then actually facing it and learning to be honest, learning to talk about it, learning to do things you don't want to do and take contrary action, learning to be of service, finding your purpose, learning skills, learning to communicate. I do think that's one person at a time that creates a different society. Mm-hmm. One person at a time that creates a different society, a different community that we want to belong to. I think people are always like, well, people are just fucked up. I don't want to belong there. Okay, so become the community that you want to belong to. Like, become the person that you want to be around.
Yeah, and you'll find that all of a sudden you're around people that you want to be around.
Isn't that amazing?
Speaking of, let's talk Emergence 2024. I mean, as of the release of this, will be just a couple of weeks away. We're both going to be on the same panel of media people that have talked in the space of mental health and sobriety. So we hope you join us. Click that link in the podcast description. But I got to ask a couple of random questions and ask you for the final thoughts. So being that you are an actress, if you could work with one director in history, who would it be?
David O. Russell.
Why?
Oh my God. Okay, so just so we're clear, this last week I watched Joy. I'm like already crying about it. I watched Joy. I watched American Hustle 3 weeks ago. I watched Flirting with Disaster, and I watched Silver Linings Playbook. The way he writes is so real. He really focuses on family dynamics, and he's very relational in his scripts. Mm-hmm. And it's so real that it's so funny. Like, it's so authentic that it gives people this space to go, holy shit, I'm like that. And he has this way of writing, and the actors that he hires, they're so vulnerable. They're so authentic, and they're so available to like the simplicity of connection, and the depth of connection in those moments and the way he writes it, that I love him so much. I respect him as an artist so much. And I think that when you're an artist, it's about trusting the other person, trusting your director, trusting the writer, trusting the actor that you're in the scene with, trusting, the grips. The whole process is about letting go and trusting so that this character can move through you, this energy can move through you. And I could cry, honestly, because his scripts are they're so beautiful. And when things are real, I'm affected so deeply. And it makes me feel less alone. And I think that's what art is supposed to do. I think art makes me feel less alone. And whenever I'm creating art, that's what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to help people feel less alone.
Yep. Yeah, for me, it's when I can always go back and hearing that first part of music in Star Wars, that little 5-year-old boy that was so happy. And when I was at Disneyland recently, walked into a land of Star Wars, like, oh, I'm going to cry. All right. What do you think the best piece of advice you've ever received is?
Such a good question. I also really do my best to be honest. So I pause so that I can think. There's also so much to choose from. I think take contrary action is probably the best piece of advice I've been given, because anytime I'm about to do something new, my head says, don't do it. It's too much. You're not going to be liked. It's going to be too overwhelming. It's going to be stress. My head always tells me to do the opposite of the thing that I'm supposed to do. And so I always say to myself, I actually say, fuck it, do it anyway. But that's the contrary action. Sure. I don't know if I'm allowed to curse on here, but.
Oh, yeah. We already have.
Oh, yeah. I mean, yeah, I would say contrary action, because everything that I've created has been from a place of contrary action. Rarely do I ever wake up in the morning. When it comes to like working out, rarely do I ever like want to go do 500 calories worth of cardio. So it's always about contrary action, doing the opposite of what my head says to do.
Yeah. If anyone wants to connect with Rachel, the information is in the podcast description. And this is where I ask you for the final thoughts. Any last words of wisdom that you want to drop on some people, maybe anyone that's struggling, have a loved one that's struggling?
Yeah, that's thank you for asking that. I want to say it's going to be okay. My favorite line from a book is do what's in front of you and let God handle the results. Do what's in front of you and let God handle the results. Even if you don't believe in God, believe that there is some type of power. Just even consider that if there is, right? And if you don't have to figure everything out, and there's this power that is figuring it all out for you and is really wanting to do everything in for your best interest, right? Could you start having faith and trust in that? Okay, if you are, great. All you have to focus on is what's in front of you. And that's it. That's it. It's just that next step, right? And there's a song from Frozen 2 that it goes, just do the next right thing, take a step again, and it's like, that's it. Just focus on the next right thing, because we have this mind that's like, I'm going to focus on everything in the past, and then I'm going to focus on everything in the future that hasn't happened yet. And the only place I'm not going to focus on is right now.
Yep.
So just do what's in front of you. Let God handle the results. That's my last bit of hope message.
Second mic drop of the podcast. Hey, I look forward to connecting you with you.
I'm so excited to meet you.
It's going to be great. And on that note, for all you listening, remember, no outside solutions to inside problems, and keep knocking doors down.